What's up, everyone? Aaron Nagler here for PackersNews.com, live on Facebook late afternoon on Tuesday. For a change, not a whole lot of breaking news today coming out of 1265 Lombardi. I'd forgotten what that feels like. But I did tell you all I'd be back today, and here I am to answer any of your questions. There have been a few dribs and drabs coming out of the Packers universe today. Obviously, the only legit breaking news today is that Mike Daniels has been named to the Pro Bowl and to replace Aaron Donald. But as far as hardcore football moves for the Packers, still very much up in the air, in limbo, with Mike McCarthy reportedly interviewing Mike Pettin, the former head coach of the Cleveland Browns, defensive coordinator for the Bills, and longtime associate of Rex Ryan's, both in New York with the Jets and in Baltimore with the Ravens. That would be, just to put it out there, an excellent hire. I know I've very much been on the Fangio train. Some accused me of driving it today. Don't think that's quite the case, but I did. I was asked about Fangio, or actually about my preference weeks ago, and I said that Fangio made the most sense. But I tell you what, Mike Pettin would be an excellent choice for Mike McCarthy. Obviously, the other piece of news floating around out there today, the Packers asking permission, even though they didn't have to, of the San Diego Chargers to interview Gus Bradley. His contract is up. Obviously, Bradley, another former head coach, who prior to his, no other way to put it, failed stint in Jacksonville, was a highly regarded defensive coordinator up in Seattle, and is coming off a strong year working in San Diego. Now, of course, having Melvin Ingram and Joey Bosa helps in that regard, but most guys are a product of the talent put on the field for them. But those are guys that Mike McCarthy obviously wants to talk to. One guy he reportedly has talked to today. And then, of course, there is the aforementioned Vic Fangio, who became a free agent as of 12:01 this morning. And I know our Tom Silverstein reported that that is obviously an interview that the Packers have interest in, and that Mike McCarthy will be interviewing him for the position. So I did want to wait till the end of the day in case maybe something happened in one of the interviews, in Pettin's interview perhaps, that he just blew his socks off and he decided to go with him right then and there, but doesn't seem like that's happened, so I thought I'd jump on here and talk to you fine folks. Like Tony, what's up, man? Goots first signing, Ziggy Ansah, Dusty. Let's let franchise tags and transition tags be doled out first before we start naming who Gutekunst may or may not go after in free agency. How he handled a huge mess here. Pettin, yeah, I agree. I thought he was handed a real bum deal there in Cleveland, and I thought he did about as good a job as you can do given the circumstance that he was in there. I think as a defensive mind, you could do a lot worse, and I think his time with Rex, both in Baltimore and in New York, leading up to his coordinator gig there in Buffalo, he'd be a multiple front guy, obviously kind of steeped in the 3-4 base, as that's where that defense comes from, but he showed in Buffalo that he's not afraid to switch things up and be extremely multiple. Oh, and I'm sorry, I'm fighting through a cold, everyone. It really hit me last night, so I probably won't go too long today, but I did want to jump on because, like I said, I told you I would. Claire, that's an excellent question. Is Eliot Wolf going to stay with the Packers? Well, I know he has an offer from the Packers to stick around in a certain position. No one really knows exactly what that would be. They've kept that in-house, and we haven't been able to pry that out of anyone. He also was in Cleveland today interviewing with John Dorsey for a position with the Browns. Obviously, he'd be joining former Packers Dorsey and Alonzo Highsmith there. And I saw a little while ago that I think it was ESPN reported that Reggie McKenzie has offered him a position out in Oakland where he would be joining McKenzie and former Packers coach and new, now again, head coach of the Raiders, John Gruden. So he clearly has options. Obviously, all of them Packers related as far as the personnel and where they came from. I would be very surprised if Eliot stuck around. And I mentioned this on Twitter earlier today, and it got a lot of traction. And I understand why. Everyone's got an opinion. My only thing, was pointing out the fact that, Eliot's been a good soldier for a long time in that organization. He was denied permission to interview with the Lions a few years ago when he was reportedly the favorite for that GM job. They also denied him permission to interview with the Eagles back when Chip Kelly was there. They wanted someone to help handle personnel. They wouldn't allow that. And as Tom pointed out, there was one other instance that they denied his ability to interview with someone. And fine, yes, they did allow him to interview out in San Francisco, where he eventually withdrew his name, and with the Colts. But to go along the way and get promoted along the way, presumably to be groomed for this position, the general manager's position in Green Bay, to go along as a good soldier like that, and have your upward mobility denied on several occasions, and then to basically have the rug pulled out from under you, I can't deny the guy's humanity. I would be very surprised if he's not upset. I haven't spoken to him, but I would be very surprised if he's not upset and wanting to get the hell out of Dodge. As I said on Twitter, if that were me, now I am a very small and petty person, I admit that up front, but if that were me, I would want to get the hell out of Dodge and go someplace where I could make the Packers regret that decision for the rest of their days. Now, obviously, the Packers are going to be fine, regardless of what Eliot Wolf does. Let's say that right up front. But it's a tough business. It's a win-at-all-costs business, and the Packers made the choice that they thought. Mark Murphy made the choice that he thought gives the Packers the best shot going forward, and Eliot Wolf can only look out for himself. And it sure looks like he's got a lot of things on offer. And like I said, if I were him, I'd be out the door. But only Eliot can answer that question, and I assume we'll have some kind of resolution there in the next couple days. Barbara, thank you so much. Yes, lots of remedies being bandied about here at the Nagler house. It's just a cold. It's just annoying. What kind of timeline do you have for the DC signing, defensive coordinator signing? I would think in the next couple days. If they're putting in, a request for permission to talk to Gus Bradley today, I don't think they could interview him until at least tomorrow, unless he's already in the air on his way there today. Maybe interviews late this afternoon tonight. But I would tend to think, they were interviewing Pettin today. Most likely, I would think Fangio either late today or tomorrow. So I would think the earliest we might see something is late tomorrow afternoon. Now, I say that, and hell, it could break right now. I mean, Tom could have something out on Twitter as we speak. Like I said, I tried to wait as long as I could to make sure that this wasn't going to happen today. It still could happen tonight. Who knows? But I would tend to think tomorrow morning at the earliest, but I'm sorry, late tomorrow afternoon at the earliest, but probably I would think Thursday or Friday probably is more realistic. Preston asking about Kevin Green. I've got a lot of Kevin Green questions. I don't see it. I think he left for a reason, and I had someone email me saying, when he came back into coaching, there were no positions available in Green Bay. But I tend to think it's a little bit more than that. I think McCarthy could have very easily made a position for Kevin if he had so desired. I just think there's something going on there that maybe we're not privy to. And I've asked up and down, and everyone swears it's just the old wanted to spend time with his family as for why he moved on. But those things are, the want to spend more time with your family announcement when you're leaving a job anywhere in this world is rarely because you want to be spending more time with your family. A-Rod contract on the top of the list. Dale, absolutely. You got to think it's Gutekunst's and Ball's first number one priority. To go much further down the line, if you can find Pete Doherty's column from last summer, you can Google Pete Doherty, Aaron Rodgers franchise tag. That should get you to the article I'm talking about. Pete does a great job of laying out why anything past this summer, and Rodgers has very little kind of incentive to sign an extension after this summer because, yes, obviously injury factor, etc., is always something that's going to be lorded over a player's head. You saw him miss extensive time this year, but Aaron Rodgers has made his money, and now it's just a question of maximizing his worth, which is only going to go up and up the closer he gets to quote unquote free agency, which obviously he would never hit, but. That tag looming, you've seen how things have played out with Kirk Cousins in Washington, and that price, that 1 year tag number, it gets bigger and bigger every year you do it, and the quarterback spot alone in and of itself is already a pretty sizable cap hit. The Packers don't want anything to do with that, so they will undoubtedly make Rodgers their number one priority this summer as far as getting his contract squared away and having mapped out however many years they give him, what those cap hits are going to be throughout the length of that contract to ensure that they don't take any kind of massive bump as far as the percentage of the salary cap throughout the life of it. David, did Wolf's age work against him? Yes, I think absolutely it did. Which, I can't say I'm surprised. He would be, I think he would have been the youngest GM in the league. Ryan Pace was 37 when he was hired in Chicago, and Wolf is 35, I believe. So that would have made him the youngest GM. But so yeah, I think that absolutely played a part of it. Do the Packers go after a cornerback in free agency? I was saying on the radio this morning, I think it's hard to project how Gutekunst is going to operate. I would tend to think yes, seeing as he has said he is going to use every avenue to improve the team, and you're not going to be able to fix and patch all the holes on this team in one draft. There's no doubt about that. So I would tend to think, if he's true to his word, yes, I think they will look at corner. Now, will they look, first 48 hours silly money time in free agency for a corner? I tend to doubt that, but you can't rule anything out because, like I said, we don't know. We don't have a track record to work off of anymore. So it's a bit of a mystery heading into this offseason for the first time in a long time up in Green Bay. Who is the oldest GM in the NFL? I believe it's Jerry Jones, who is obviously the owner but also acts as the general manager. Now, obviously, his son Steven has taken a lot of those responsibilities over the years, but he is still officially a GM and I believe the oldest. Now, Mike Brown in Cincinnati is also in that conversation, another owner who works as a GM. And I think Belichick's in that conversation too, although I think he's like third or fourth. What's Murphy like? He is now the king. Dennis, that's a really good question. I think it's hard to say, having not spent a significant amount of time with the man. I have run into him over the years, whether it was here in New York at the opening of the Lombardi on Broadway, whether it's in Green Bay, whether it's in hotel, kind of passing each other on the road. I get the sense that his heart's in the right place, and he obviously takes his job very seriously. As he mentioned yesterday, he thought he needed to be more involved throughout the last couple of years, and that's one of the reasons he's moved to position himself as he has. I've had a lot of kind of comments in my mentions on Twitter and in my email about his demeanor in the press conferences that he's held the last 2 weeks. And look, man, is he a dynamic, orator? No, of course not. But that's not his job. And his job is to be the steward of the Green Bay Packers. And in so much that he's been asked to do that a certain way so far in his career, I think he's done a good job. This was obviously his first and probably biggest football decision that he's had to make. And only time will tell as to how that plays out and what that means for his legacy as president and CEO of the Packers. But look, up until this point, he's done a fine job. So that's all you can really judge him on. We keeping Jordy and letting Cobb go? No, David. I'd be absolutely shocked. If they were to let someone go, I would think it would be Jordy, but I don't think they're going to let either one of those guys go. Seems like Murphy just doesn't want to stand up to Mike. I don't get that sense, Randall. I get the sense that he very much likes Mike and admires him and thinks he's a good coach. Now, obviously, I know there is a great big part of the fan base that doesn't agree with that assessment, but I do believe that one of the reasons that this move was made and the structure was changed is because of the fact of how strongly he feels about Mike McCarthy being the coach of the Packers and how much he wants to help him succeed. Now, obviously, it is up to Mike this year. There is no two ways about it. He has got to put a winner on the field. Obviously, that starts with Gutekunst and the assembling of the roster, but they have got to win games and win a lot of them to justify keeping him around or giving him an extension past this season. Because make no mistake, if we get to the December of next year and they're middling at 7-7 or 7-9, coming in at 7-9, 8-8, there will be untold amounts of talk once again about McCarthy's contract heading into a lame duck year. and then they're going to have to be, and that's obviously dependent on Rodgers being healthy and all that, but that will become an issue, and there will be some hard questions asked at that point if that happens to be the case. Will they let 11 and 83 go? Meaning Davis and Janis. I think Janis will be back. I think he's too valuable on special teams for them to let him walk. Now, are they going to overpay to keep him? I doubt that. Now, maybe they let him hit free agency and then welcome him back if he doesn't get a deal he likes out there, which I suspect would be the case. But he has immense value for them on teams, so I would think they bring him back. As for Trevor Davis, I want to say he has another year left on his, or 2 years left on his rookie deal. It's all about competition, and as Gutekunst said at his press conference yesterday, one of the things they need to do is to foster competition at every position and let the cream rise, so to speak. And I think it's pretty clear that he was on the team this year because they thought he could be a dynamic returner. That never materialized. He had obviously a nice return here or there, capped off by the almost game saver in Cleveland. But for the most part, he had a very rough outing as a returner throughout the season. And to have that be your justification for keeping him on the roster over maybe next year a developing guy like D'Angelo Yancey, to be as an example, that's going to be awfully tough. So we'll see. I mean, there's a lot to play out there. But I tend to think, yes, I don't think they cut him outright anytime soon. But you never know. Gutekunst is his own man. And if he has seen enough, he'll cut ties. I mean, that's one of the hard things you have to do as a new general manager. So you have to be ruthless with the roster you've inherited and put your stamp on it and get your guys in there. Because the longer you put that off, the more the ideas and decisions from a past regime are going to start influencing how people view you. And clearly, as a GM, you want to put your stamp on it. You want your guys out on the field. Davis doesn't make good decisions. Felipe, I would agree, especially as a punt returner. You should have paid with 49ers paid New England for Jimmy Garoppolo and then flipped him for a king's ransom. Well, yeah, I mean, it's easy to say that. The problem is the Patriots didn't call Ted Thompson. They called the 49ers. They called John Lynch, and they talked to Kyle Shanahan. If you read the ESPN article from Seth there, broke a couple days ago, they made it pretty clear. Belichick had his eye on the 49ers, and because of the relationship he had with Kyle Shanahan. So I don't think that you can call that a Ted Thompson error. He wasn't offered Garoppolo. And lots of people tried to get Garoppolo prior to this season, and the Patriots continually shut people down. So it's hard to blame Thompson for that one. What do you think they do with Jari Evans? Good question, Tom. I thought he was probably one of the best signings that Ted Thompson has ever made. And I know that sounds like a bold statement, but to lose TJ Lang and then on the eve of the draft to sign Evans for a dirt cheap deal. I mean, an absolutely ridiculously cheap deal for a 1-year kind of stopgap. The level of play they got from him. Now, he faded a bit down the stretch in the month of December, but for the most part, he had an excellent season. And for the amount of money from the ROI they got, as far as what they were paying TJ last year to what they were paying Evans this year, there was a bit of a dip in play, but for the price, that's a ridiculously well played switch. So yeah, I think maybe they try and bring him back on the cheap again. I know he told our Ryan Wood that he's considering retirement. I would be surprised if he didn't retire, actually, but if he's open to it, I would absolutely bring him back, at least for camp, and see how that position shakes out, how that right side of the line shakes out. I do think right tackle is actually the bigger question mark heading in next season. I think McCray has shown that he can probably be your starting guard next year. The question is, what do you do at right tackle? Because right now, Bulaga is most likely starting the season on PUP. Who knows with Jason Spriggs and that knee? And Spriggs wasn't even looking that good even when he was healthy. So, big question there at right tackle, I would think. How many pass rushers would you draft? Peter, I'd draft all of them. It's hard to say. until we know what scheme they're running, what kind of guys they're going to be looking for. Obviously, the outside linebacker types who are standing up are going to be a little different than your prototypical 4-3 ends. But yeah, I think pass rushers have got to be a focal point in free agency and the draft. This team, for any number of years now, has been, sadly lacking when it comes to guys who can win one-on-ones and get to the quarterback. Let me see. What do you think the reason for needing to report to Murphy weekly is, and is McCarthy now under the microscope? That's a good question, because it's clear that changed over the course of a week, where last week Murphy stood up there in front of the media and said, the GM will have the power to hire and fire the coach, to fast forward to this week where he said, well, yes, things changed in the interview process, and how he wanted to knock down the silos that had formed in football operations. As for McCarthy being more under a microscope and the weekly meetings, I've expressed my misgivings about that setup. I talked about it at length yesterday. I would suggest going and watching that video for reasons why. As far as being under a microscope, though, McCarthy, he got what he wanted here. He got a guy who is going to supposedly be more aggressive in free agency, is going to do a better job of providing him with better frontline talent and a little bit more depth. At least that's the talk right now. And so he has no more excuses. He's got to be successful. So in so much that he's under the microscope of he's got to produce, yeah, he's under the microscope. But I think, like I said before, a little earlier here, I think this really speaks to Murphy's fondness and admiration for Mike McCarthy more than anything else. Offensive line is also in bad shape, lots of holes. Well, I was just talking about right tackle. I think that's your biggest concern. I think, from your left tackle, left guard, and center, you're set. They just re-signed Corey Linsley. They got Lane Taylor there. They just re-signed him earlier last season. And you got David Bakhtiari, who's one of the best left tackles in the league. And as I was just talking about McCray, I think he's more than shown that he's capable of being your starting right guard. It's right tackle. That's the issue. I think the rest of the line is set. Obviously, you'd probably like a little bit more depth, but so would everyone in the NFL. But yeah, right tackle. Who's going to be your opening day starter at right tackle in 2018? That's a major question that Gutekunst has to answer. It seemed to me Mark Murphy was trying to... they go too fast. We got a defensive coordinator yet? Nope, Brian, not yet. Is it true we're going to dip into free agency? Who do you think are possible options for us to pursue? I got to be honest, I haven't really taken a deep dive into it yet, if only because I haven't gone through and looked at who might get franchised or transition tagged. I had planned to, but then Mark Murphy kind of blew up the Packers a little bit. So I'm sorry, I apologize for that. I will have a better handle on that starting next week. Can we be successful right away with this many new coaches? Yes. In fact, they have to be. I think there's a big reason Mike McCarthy has kind of gone out of his way to bring back guys he has a history with. He doesn't want to be teaching terminology. He doesn't want to be, getting guys up to speed on how things are supposed to be done, on their way of doing things in Green Bay. He wants to hit the ground running, and bringing in guys he has a history with is a good way of going about that. Did the Packers make a trade with the Bills? Yeah, a while ago. Actually, if you're following along, I saw a Bills reporter tweeted out that the Packers will be getting a 7th-round pick for McCray, the Denver linebacker that they traded. Did they trade for him? I think they traded for him. I can't remember if they picked him up in free agency or they traded for him. But regardless, Ted Thompson traded him, kind of flipped him before he ever played a regular season down in Green Bay. And he met the terms necessary for the Packers to receive a draft pick. So they will have an extra 7th-round pick in April. Put Perry back at defensive end. Well, if they go to 4-3, there's a chance that might happen. Philbin is a good OC. Adam, he was very good in Green Bay, I'll tell you that. Let's get Rex Ryan as defensive coordinator. David, I'll tell you what, they're interviewing Mike Pettin today, and he's actually a much better option at this point, I would think. Rex Ryan has spent a good long while in a television studio at this point, and those last few years in Buffalo were pretty ugly. I don't know how much he's in tune to what's going on in the game today. I know Mike Pettin has kind of kept up with things, although he has been out of coaching. I think he'd be a better option and someone who runs a similar scheme. How soon do we work on Cobb and Nelson? Justin, good question. I think, Cobb had said when he spoke with the reporters on Clean Out Your Locker Day that, he hadn't heard anything. Or actually, no, he said it after the Detroit game, that he hadn't heard anything from his agent. Now, there's a lot of time between now and free agency. But I tend to think that, he might not touch either one of them. They can withstand the cap hit. It's maybe a one-year spike of spending at the wide receiver spot, but it's not going to kill them. It's not going to stop them from going to get anybody. Maybe they do something with Nelson's contract, but that remains to be seen. With new general manager at the helm, do you see the Packers more aggressive in free agency? Yes, I do, but only because it'll be, it's close to impossible to be less aggressive in free agency. Your thoughts on this year's draft choices? Most were hurt or a bust. Well, let's go down the line. I think there was a lot of hurt. Kevin King obviously ended hurt. I thought he played pretty damn well when he was out on the field. He was a much better tackler than I was prepared to see. That was not the book on him coming in, and he showed a real willingness to tackle, regardless of who the ball carrier was, which is what you like to see, and I thought his cover skills looked really good. And then obviously the companion to that, because of the move down, was Vince Beagle, who did spend a lot of time on PUP, unable to play, didn't see the field a whole lot, and then when he did, he looked a little lost, but I don't think that's a surprise, seeing as the guy missed the entire offseason for all intents and purposes. Montravius Adams couldn't get on the field, redshirt year, no doubt about it. So yeah, I mean, guys were hurt, there's no doubt about it, and that absolutely hurt their production on the field. Kevin King was surprisingly aggressive. Scott, I agree. Like I said, that was not what I saw in his college tape, but he was very good. Mike with a Chelsea comment. I like it. We're not talking Blues here now, man. I got to do that on my personal page. Best places to eat in Green Bay. Randy, you are asking the wrong guy. I'm a Butterburger man. I always go to Kroll's. My wife gets upset with me because whenever I'm in Green Bay and I'm working at Lambeau Field, I inevitably stop what I'm doing and go across the street and eat a Butterburger. And I don't get in my car, I don't go anywhere. I always just go to Kroll's. So, I'm sorry, you're asking the wrong guy. No, there's no news. For someone who said they just jumped on regarding Gus Bradley, no new news about whether he's interviewing or not. I know the Packers have asked permission, even though they didn't need to. So clearly they are expressing interest there, but nothing as far as if he's coming in for an interview or not. Do they have to have a hard look at the training staff? Sean, I think they will. I don't know how much, quote unquote, they have to. I know a lot of Packer fans, Mike McCarthy's mentioned it, about, the spate of injuries and how it seems to be ongoing. But, you look around the league, man, it's not an only in Green Bay thing. Now, some of the muscle pulls, hamstrings, things of that nature, maybe that's something they can look at, but everyone's hurt, man. The injury rate in the NFL is 100%. Someone asked about Josh Jones. Thank you. Sorry, I forgot to include him in my rundown of the rookies. I thought he clearly showed promise at times, but I thought, especially as the year went on, you saw more and more of what Darren Perry was talking about last summer when he said that he was swimming, especially when he has to play that free safety spot. Or any kind of safety spot in space. I thought the closer to the line of scrimmage he was, the better he was. And I think that's his natural spot. But when he's asked to play anything on the back end, it was ugly. I mean, it was bad. So, and that's, he's a rookie. He's swimming. I get it. Hopefully he spends the offseason buried in his playbook and comes back and hits the ground running in the spring. But, like I said, the promise is there. He could take a big jump from year one to year two, which is where you traditionally see guys who go on to have really long, good careers. They generally make that jump year one to year two. So Josh Jones, I think, is definitely a candidate for that to happen. Would love for Packers to draft Josh Jackson, Iowa corner, for the first pick. Iowa players have been good to the Packers. There's no doubt about that. I think when you draft a Hawkeye, you get a really good football player. No doubt. Let's see. Green Bay needs to be somewhat aggressive on free agency. Jeff, I think they tend to agree with you on that one. Josh Jones' best game was against the Bengals. No doubt about it, Adam. No question. And I was always kind of surprised that Dom didn't use him more the way he did in that game, as the season went along. Now, obviously, injuries played into that somewhat, and he was needed other places. But like I said, the closer to the line of scrimmage he gets, the more disruptive he's allowed to be at the line of scrimmage, the better he is as a player, at least so far. Is drafting a QB early a necessity? I don't think so necessarily, but I absolutely wouldn't rule it out. And it would fit with Gutekunst's, say that 5 times fast, his proclamation that he wanted to foster competition at all positions. Well, clearly, the backup quarterback spot needs to improve. There is no doubt about that. Okay, and now everyone's throwing out their favorites for draft picks. I'll let you guys do that. As I sojourn to my bed, I'm so tired and sick. I'm so sorry, everyone, but thanks for sticking with me. I'm sorry if I didn't get to your question. They do go by very fast, but make sure you're checking PackersNews.com for all the latest. We'll have it all up for you throughout the evening and then throughout the week as the search for the defensive coordinator continues. And don't forget, there are a lot of other spots that need to be filled on that coaching staff. Both the defensive line coaches are now gone. And who knows what will happen with Winston Moss, Darren Perry, and Joe Witt. I think a large part of that depends on who gets hired as DC. So lots to come. Make sure you're at PackersNews.com for all the latest. Thanks so much for putting up with the sick guy. I'll talk to you guys probably tomorrow. Have a good night.